Hi, and welcome back to another edition of the Fundraisers podcast, where we bring you the voice and the wisdom from all the best fundraisers that we can find from around the world. Today, I've got Michele Lee here today, who's one of the amazing fundraisers in the market, works at a placement agent called Capstone. Thank you very much, Michele, for coming down, right?
Thanks for having me here. Yeah.
You know, we met was it like 1 or 2 months ago,
Yeah.
right? And we met at Dimbala. We had a very interesting conversation. And one of the things that I think triggered me into wanting to invite you into the podcast is because of your profound wisdom, if I can put it this way, right? In how you very eloquently articulated the definition of a good salesperson and the sales process as well, particularly when it comes to fundraising, because you've seen fund managers pitch to you, you've also been on the other side pitching to investors. There was one point though where you spoke about a biblical verse, and I know you're very holy, you go to church a lot, and it's sort of shaped who you are as a person. And the verse went something along the lines of, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And I remember you saying something about it. Would you mind just sharing with everyone, how that has shaped who you are as a fundraiser, perhaps?
Yeah. So I think people tend to think that good fundraisers have got to tell a good story. I think that's probably important. You do need to tell great stories, but I think fundamental to it is also listening out for the needs of the LP. When you speak to someone, you want to know what that person needs before you propose a solution to it. So I think what is most important to me really is to listen, to understand first before I speak, before I come to a conclusion, or before I propose a solution to it. And sometimes it can mean that there are no immediate solution. LP could be telling you, oh, this is what I need, and I don't have a product for that, but that's fine, because you can keep in mind, thank you for your time. A few months later, you could come back and close that deal because you now have a product that the LP would have a need for. So I guess that's pretty much how I go about doing my work in general.
So you practice that, right?
Yeah.
Is this something that you've been taught at an early age as well, like to always be patient, listen first? Has it been part of your values as well?
Yes, for sure. I mean, it's true that the Bible verse has influenced me a lot. It's also true that through my growing up years, I spent a lot of time, even after I came out to work, I spent a lot of time with youths. I did quite a bit of youth work in church, and I think what is important is youths, teenagers, they want to be understood. They want to know that someone is listening, Everyone's telling them what you should do, what you should not do, and sometimes it doesn't get through to them, but that's probably because they want to be understood first. So I think that sort of work sort of spilled over into my life, and I realized that everyone wants to be understood first, I think. Yeah.
It is. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, right?
That's so true. Yeah.
So, and my mum always used to say that empty vessels make the most noise.
Yeah. Actually, my dad says that as well. Just that, when he said it, he had a sinister meaning behind it, right? So it makes me think twice. But over time, as I grew up, I think it's not so bad an idea after all, because it is true. If you sit in a room and you listen, there are always smart people around. There are always people with great ideas. Rarely are we the only ones, right?
Yes.
So I think it makes sense, to listen. Yeah.
Yes. So have you had any complaints from LPs in the past where they say that, well, we have these fund managers that come in and just sort of push without actually really listening? I mean, has there been any sort of strong validation that you've had over the years from your LPs?
I think LPs are very cordial. Because they never know when their IC are going to tell them, okay, we're going to switch strategy and focus on something else. So they are very cordial. But one of the signs that could tell you that you are not pitching something that they want is when they say, we'll think about it. That was really interesting. Thank you for your time. And then when you ask them, do you need more information? We'll come back to you if we need.
Right. That sounds terrible.
Yeah. But then, they do want to be cordial because you never know. 6 months, 2 years down the road, they could be looking at a similar strategy. But it's just that at that point, they didn't think that this was a product that was right for them. But nowadays, I would say that LPs are also more conscious of fund managers' time. So they, if they feel that if they have some initial information and they feel that this is not right for them, sometimes they don't agree to a introductory meeting, right? So I think that's good as well. Yeah.
But you must go on pitches with the fund managers as well, right?
Yes.
When you go there, and do you provide that counsel to them as well, that this is how you need to be? And
yes, so we pre-qualify most LP meetings, meaning that I would have one or more chats with the LPs before I believe that the GP can make a difference, because typically we speak to the LP about the sort of funds they are seeing, what kind of funds would interest them, and along the way, if there is some common ground, there's some interest, and then I would suggest, why not speak to this GP, that's fundraising. This GP is interesting, seem to meet most of your requirements, and is in the space that you want. And I would have some information for the GP as well. I'll be able to tell them that, the LP has just gone through, maybe a portfolio review. They now want to beef up their portfolio with additional funds that are within this strategy. So those are value add that intermediaries like us can bring to the table. So it helps the LPs sort out. I mean, I sieve it through, right? I don't just throw everyone at them. And then I help the GP to also sieve out those with real interest, so that they don't spend their time meeting someone who, roll their eyes. So, yeah.
So how do you qualify a GP then? What are the things that you look for?
So for GPs, I would say that I look for 3 T's. 3 T's refer to the team. It has to be a team that works together, works well, complementary in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. I will look at their track record. Obviously, they need to, show some form of track record as a team, that they have executed their strategy, they did well. And last of all, I think it's really timeliness. Timeliness is the most difficult factor. It's not directly tied to the GP, but it's more of whether this strategy is the right strategy in this moment, at this point in the market. So that's something that intermediaries like us have to go figure out. We probably have to do a lot of ground survey, talk to people, reach out to LPs, just to know, is this sort of strategy going to take off? Of course, we rely a lot on LP surveys. We rely on data. We look at certain trends as well. But one of the more important parts is to really talk to the LPs within my network to see whether there is interest for such a product. Yeah.
Interesting. Let's double click a little bit on team. Then we'll talk a little bit about the track record, and then a little bit more about the timing. Give me an example of a team. How would you describe a great team? What are the things that you look for? Would you be looking for the typical Ivy League kind of education, gone to big bulge bracket firms, or from an academic experience perspective, or is there other things that make up?
All of those are great, but the truth is, when it comes to team, it's important to meet the key people in the team, the key people who make investment decisions together. You can have great backgrounds. I'm not opposed to a great team with Ivy League credentials, but I would say that a team that is able to complement each other is probably more important. So within the team, there are always risk takers. There are also people who are very conservative. I think it's important to have a balance of both. You need someone who can point out the 100 things about this deal that can go wrong, but you also need an optimist to see, the silver lining, and to pick that deal that is going to, give you your 10 times return. So I think all of those are important. So therefore, a team that's worked together for a few years is always important. There are also GPs that we have met that have teams that are new to each other. But I think what mitigated that team factor is also when they say that, but I know this guy for the last 10 years, even though we were in different firms, but we worked together a lot on this project or that project, and we have encountered each other in different transactions. I think that also factors in. So at the end of the day, we're looking for a team of people to make decisions together, good decisions, because there are no good or bad deals, right? They're just good or bad decisions at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Would you say that the CIO, obviously the main sort of investment professional, and then perhaps a really strong COO that have known each other, work together, are the two most important people? Or would you say, actually, well, hang on a minute, it's not just the COO that's less important, it's more the investment team having worked together?
Yes.
So the yin and yang is less, but maybe more the alpha generation capability. And how would you, which side would you balance that?
Unfortunately, I think in most GPs, they don't have a COO that could pull the stops on all the deals. I think most of the time, the people who are sitting on the IC are actually investment professionals. So I have to look at the makeup of that IC, maybe the team, the investment team, in terms of their strengths. Some of them, they have a few key members who are really good at deal sourcing versus a team with just one guy deal sourcing, right? That's obviously a key man risk to it. So, yeah.
Let's move on to then a track record. Over my years of experience, I've come across plenty of people who claim to have done, more than 25, 30% IRR, 4x, 3x. You hear all those amazing track records. How often do you come across people with amazing track records, perfect team, the perfect time as well? How often is that?
I would say that most of the teams that we have decided to work with, they meet most of the criteria. Otherwise, we wouldn't be working with them. So there are great teams out there. I think in Southeast Asia, DPI is an issue. People have grade 4 times, 3 times MOIC, but they rarely distribute money back to LPs. So we do have GPs we work with who are able to distribute money back, who are able to deliver. So the 3 times MOIC is realized. It's not unrealized figure. So there are. I mean, I would have to say that most of our clients meet majority of the criteria, right? Yeah.
If somebody has, because if you're good, you would have done some bad deals as well, right? What if somebody has had, obviously, do you look at the whole thing, right? So you would definitely be looking for the failures as well, right? And how they look. Is there any sort of specifics you look around that?
Yes. Before we take on a GP, we do look at the track record. We do talk to them about the deals that they have in the portfolio. Obviously, we want to hear about, what went wrong for the deals that didn't do well. So it's not so much whether they have bad deals, but it's also about how do they mitigate the less than stellar performance, right? So it's always easier for buyout funds to do something about it. But what if you are a growth or a VC fund? What do you do with that? So we have high quality GP that told us that, when it comes to their strategy, they will look at a company, they will tend to estimate what sort of returns they can get from the company. And even before things go badly or, things go downhill, they actually try to exit from companies that they feel will not hit the sort of expected return they want, which is maybe 3 to 5 times. So I think that's a lot of forward planning, which is really good. So if you actively manage your portfolio, to some extent, you could mitigate a lot of that.
Let's move on to then the final T, which is timing. I remember watching a TED Talk. Can't remember for the life of me what it was called, but it was about most of the big successful startups in the world have all done it because of their timing was impeccable, right? And then in this TED Talk, he was just going through like all the main things that contribute to success, and timing was the most critical out of everything. He said everything, put it to one side. If your timing is good and everything else is kind of okay, you'll still make it. So it's really interesting that you brought it up. Can you give me like examples perhaps of things that you came to your desk, just bad timing?
Plenty, actually. Plenty. If you have a great fund manager now based in Ukraine, that timing would be bad. Even if they were the most creative, they have 10 times return on most of their portfolio, timing is just bad because LPs are not going to take that risk. And we have also seen credit funds doing really well during the pandemic, or Asian emerging markets manager struggling a little more, partly because things are unstable. LPs then want to look for larger markets, bigger markets. They want to look for a market that is deeper, just so that they could manage part of the risk. There are great products out there. There are great fund managers, but sometimes the timing of the market is also something that we can't control. And despite having met all the earlier T's, the last part of it is something that honestly, even as placement agents, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't tell the future. But when we look at a product and then we think about the current macro, we think there is a chance. Obviously, we take on mandates that we believe we can raise money for. So we take that on. But if things were to change rapidly, after that, such as the war, such as inflation, such as pandemic, all of this, I'm sure every fund manager that went into the market in early 2020 never expected, the COVID-19 pandemic to last 2.5 years. Everyone thought that, oh dear, this is unexpected, but it's likely to be like SARS, right? It'll be gone in the next few months. So, let's just push ourselves, keep moving, things are going to get better. But it never happened. So I could say that, timing is definitely, if you are in a market in a timely manner, I think that allows you to raise the money quickly. Yeah.
Are there any tweaks you can do? Let's say part of your investment strategy is Russia or Ukraine or whatever. Is there anything that you can actually do to sort of say, okay, look, we've sanctioned that off, or we're going to carry on but without it? Or if it was an investor that you've brought on from Russia and it's a little bit sensitive, have you seen any fund managers sort of make tweaks to their portfolio or their LPs to overcome this timing barrier?
We have seen 2 GPs. Their mandate includes Myanmar. So Myanmar is, also in a similar situation. There was a military coup recently and then, things are not great. So what they have done is one of the GPs have decided not to focus on Myanmar as a key market. And then the other one has decided to ring fence their asset there. So there are different ways you can do to mitigate it. You can also allow LPs option to opt out of that particular investments. Yeah.
Okay, so look, we want to talk a little bit about your background as well. So you came from Ministry of Health, right? Defense, Ministry of Defense.
Yes.
And moved over to UOB, where you did a solid fundraising role at the GP side and then moved across. Love to know about that whole career switch, right? How that happened.
To add to all of that, my first job was in advertising sales.
Wow.
I graduated in the midst of an Asian financial crisis. After graduation, I was glad that my professor at the university remembered me and asked me if I would like to interview for a Japanese company. I did. I joined them. And I realized that I actually enjoy closing deals. I like doing the sales process. And then subsequent to that, I moved on to more communications role, which was why I joined the Ministry of Defense and then subsequently UOB. But when I got to UOB, it started off as a more communications role, but over time, there was also marketing, fundraising involved. And I realized I came a full circle, and I realized that, if I could manage the fundraising, the pitching, and the sales process, I think I really like that sort of work, yeah.
So based on your experience now, when you first started out doing fundraising to what you know now, obviously being a placement agent and you being extremely slick at what you do, there must have been some lessons that you've learned along the way, right? What would you do differently? Basically, meet yourself all those years back. What advice would you give Michele all those years ago?
I think I would have been more open to meet more prospective LPs, because one of my colleagues says best time to meet a GP is not when you have a fund to push, right? It's when you don't have something to push and people are more open to meeting up. I think that is true. And the truth is also that when you go to the LPs, when you have a fund that is launched, I think there is pressure on both ends, the LP to say yes or no, which comes quickly or sometimes not. And then on our end, there's also this pressure to want to see a resolution to it, whether it's a no or, yes, we'll progress and we'll do this. But when you meet LPs, prospective LPs, to talk about the firm, to talk about the fund management firm, the sort of progress you have made in your current investments, I think that's important too. That's like building relationship, right? That's a lot like telling a prospective customer, hey, I have this. I don't have a product to sell now, and you don't have a need for a fund like mine, but, let's just get to know each other a bit more. And one day, the LP could change their strategy. The LP could remember you, when they meet someone or a friend who wants a product like yours. Yeah. But of course, this is what I'm doing right now as an intermediary. So,
yes.
So it's fine that GPs are not doing that. They can come to us.
Yeah.
We do that on their behalf. So I have coffee sessions. I speak to LPs. I talk to them about what they want, right? So the key point is not to push everything at them, but to remember that, okay, this is what you like and this is the sort of, investment process or the sort of viewpoint you have right now. I keep that in mind and I bring the GP back another time. Yeah. So I think if you are with a fund manager, I think a lot of other aspects of fundraising or investor relations could take up your time as well. So you may not be focusing on just having coffee, right? Especially with LPs who are not going to invest in this fund or next fund, or you don't have a sales to close. It's not likely that you're going to sit down and just have a casual chat that often. So I think that's something that GPs don't do a lot of, and which is why there is a gap for us to fill. There is a obvious value add that intermediaries like us can bring to the table. Yeah.
Okay. One of the questions we get a lot from some of our listeners, there's quite a few aspiring fundraisers or people are hitting the pavement, right, quite early in their career, sort of like 5, maybe less than 10 years into it. What advice would you give them? I mean, because they get all sorts of different things. Sometimes people say to them, oh, you should just go out and meet as many people as you can, cold call the hell out of it, and book as many meetings, and then somebody more senior will say, then I'll come along and I'll close, right? And they just feel like they're hitting a brick wall, and they don't feel like that they're really progressing. And sometimes when they go for interviews with other jobs, then they're okay, they're good salespeople, but they don't have any depth, and they're really sort of looking for a platform that can give them that grooming and development of their profile. And I remember that one of the earlier guests, I should say not old guests, but earlier guests, Samir Dev, who is with ASK Capital, and he had he's very clear with everyone. He says it's all about being systematic in your LP search process, right? So before you go to them, you need to really map it out, right? So I wanted to know whether, what advice would you give to these youngsters, right, who are trying to crack it, and B, like for Samir, it was all about LP positioning, right? Being able to map things out. Would you say that is also your key thing as well, being able to map it out, or what would be your sort of advice around that?
Yeah, it is similar to it. As I mentioned, I spend time with LPs trying to understand what they need, right? So all of us, we should have a good CRM system. There's no way I could speak to 1,000 people and remember what they would like in general. But then with the CRM system, you can pull out, and the good thing is I try to schedule a meeting every few months with the same LP so that I could touch on points that we wanted to talk about, or we could revisit certain points that they had mentioned. Because 6 months ago, they say that, we're not looking at the private markets because, our private market is now overweight in terms of value when compared to the public markets. But then that could change in 6 months' time. So to be honest, it's having all this information, but it's not going to be me remembering it. I can't do that. So you do have to jot down notes, be disciplined in filling up the CRM. Of course, the CRM is not your diary, right?
Yeah.
So there are things that you have to minute down. I think meeting minutes, you need to do it. Not everyone likes doing it. I don't quite like doing it all the time, but sometimes it's necessary because you don't remember what you have said 6 months ago, let alone what the LP has told you. So to some extent, yes. And before a meeting, I think it's always important to think about what was last discussed, so that you don't go to an LP and ask the same questions, right? Though asking the same questions can be useful as well, because it shows you how much they have changed in the last 6 months. So, but yes, to some extent, it is about discipline. It is about knowing what your LP wants and putting them in certain categories, because just by yourself you can't do that. Like if I were to pick a list of tier 1 LPs for a new GP, I won't be able to do it just based on memory alone. So the CRM plays a part, because you will be able to extract based on parameters you have set before, right? Based on notes, okay, this guy likes a certain sector, and therefore you can pick up everyone with that. And of course, as you go through the names again, you do remember, hey, I remember this guy saying this. So it does help, yeah. And for those who are struggling, I would say they are actually probably at the point where everyone else if you're at the 5th year mark, I think it's telling that if you look at most great companies, some companies tend to have staff who are there for less than 5 years, and then staff who are there for more than 10 years. So what happened to the people between 5 to 10? So, yeah, the truth is everyone goes through that cycle. So in your 5th or 6th year, you start wondering, right? Do I bring value to the table? Do I, am I doing this correctly? Am I ever going to move? Because there's always someone up there. So the truth is, I don't think it applies only to fundraisers. I think in almost every job, you encounter a sort of roadblock. So you need to decide if this is something you want to carry on. And if you want to, I would encourage you, push it on, go on, develop your own method of, getting to know what LPs want. Make yourself useful. I mean, people remember you better if you value added to them, right? Whether it resulted in real sales or it didn't, doesn't matter. If the LP tells me, hey, I'm looking for a research paper on this, if you read anything on that, just send it over. I rarely take this kind of request as a, okay, sure, I'll do it. But, you never bother. I usually, take 5 minutes to half an hour just searching through, because I do see a lot of reports, right? If some of this can be useful, why not? It's just a click of the button, just sending over something. And usually it's useful because they don't have the sort of resources we have. They don't get as much, as much exposure as we do. So sometimes what you think is, easy peasy is not, yeah.
Yeah, it could be very basic ABC stuff, right?
Yes.
And you would think that it's not going to add any value, but just the gesture of it, yes. The fact that they may not have seen the article. Very useful advice there, Michele. So, hey, listeners, if you're listening, right, and that has been on the top of your mind, there is some very useful advice here. As you know, we've listened to the importance of listening, right? So we need the verse. So for those of you who are following the Christian doctrine, then you can look at it. What was the verse?
James chapter 1, verse
James
19.
Chapter 1, was it?
Verse 19.
Verse 19, everybody. All about listening. It's all about speaking slowly, right? Hopefully nobody gets angry in a fundraising pitch, but that is the foundation, right? And I often say this to my guys in my team. So I say the most important part of a sales process is understanding the client's needs. Without that, you can forget about doing anything with anyone anyway. And I can see that advice is coming through time and time again. Each question I've asked you, you've really emphasized what the client is looking for and making sure that it's done properly, right? So on that note, I would like to ask you this other burning question, which I'm sure is on the minds of everybody. What is in at the moment, right? What are people looking for? What products are like in demand given what's going on in the world? It's absolutely crazy, right? I mean, there's inflation, there's like the war you mentioned earlier. What's going on? And is there anything, do you see it changing, or what's the status right now?
Yeah. So there's a camp of LPs who believe that they should sit on cash.
Isn't that the advice we got never to do, right? Never hoard cash, right?
Yeah. But for some of them, they do have some valid reasons. The truth is, what they are experiencing is the public markets being undervalued and private markets being overvalued. And therefore, they would have to wait it out. They will have to wait for some sort of correction. Otherwise, they will have to take a more drastic move, which is to sell down their private market funds. And that's something that most people don't want to do. So which is why there's this camp of people who feel that they should wait and see. Whereas there is also another camp of people who feel that, no, I should still be investing, right? No matter how tough things are, I should still invest. I should still look at the VCs, the growth, the buyouts, because the truth is, whatever I invest now could be lower in terms of valuation, and that could do well in the next few years. Yeah. So there are different camps, but I would say keep moving.
Right. Has it ever happened before in your career where investors have started holding on to cash? Or is this the first experience you've had?
No, I think in 2018, when the market crashed, when public markets crashed, I think that was also when LPs were sitting on cash. I think even people were just not spending as much, right? Because 2007, 2006 were great years, and then 2008 and 9, people were just being cautious about spending in general. So I believe, all of that has happened. Yeah.
So we're coming towards the end of this podcast. I want to end this on a couple of more personal questions to you, right? You're very humble, Michele. As are a lot of the guests that I've brought on here, and this stigma that salespeople get is that they are, all singing, all dancing, very loud, very aggressive, very extroverted. But most of the people I've met aren't like that, and you certainly seem very grounded. How have you become like this? If that's even a question.
There are a lot of situations in our lives where we don't need to carry a name card or a CV. So that helps, right?
Yeah.
So it helps to keep you grounded, because if you're at a restaurant, you had lousy, service, you're not going to flash your name card and say, hey, buck up. So I personally feel that the lesser you think about your name card or your CV, maybe the easier life is going to be. You feel, I don't know.
They say that, don't they? They say that you should not value yourself based on the business card that you carry or your CV, because once you've lost that, then you've lost everything. There's been tons of people that work for big firms and then they go off and they're like, people don't even talk to them in conferences because people would only talk to them because they had the business card.
Exactly.
And hopefully through being so humble, there's loads of friends that will keep in touch with you, right? And because they'll see the nice side of you.
Thank you. But the truth is, everyone's going to go through that one day, because we are all going to retire, right?
Yeah, that's
I cannot imagine working in my 90s, okay? I have a lot of respect for Dr. Mahathir, but that's not the life for me. So I think upon retirement, most of us would do that. And, otherwise, I think go do some volunteer work. There are plenty of opportunities in Singapore. Yes. And I think sometimes we need that just to, have a good feel of, life around us. Yeah. Sometimes we get too caught up in our own world of, closing deals, investments, that we lose perspective, right? Yeah.
So how do you manage your own anxieties? I'm sure faith is very important. Do you pray a lot? Does that help you? Because life on the road, life when you're pitching and going out, deals and the pressure and everything else, most of us, whoever we are, like in the industry, will will know that this is a stressful job. So how do you maintain that?
I think on a daily basis, just being able to set aside time to pray and meditate helps. But the truth is, I also believe in giving my 100% and allowing God to give His 100%. Though I would say that sometimes the answer from God is no. So the truth is, with every prayer, you have to be prepared, right?
Yes.
That the answer could be yes, no, or wait. So if you're not prepared for a negative answer, then it's better not to pray. But
Yes, no,
yeah.
no, I understand. This is very interesting. Look, I think the listeners and the viewers have probably gained a lot from this. If any of them wanted to reach out to you, are you okay for them to sort of reach out to you? Is it a LinkedIn the best way to catch you? Is
Yes.
it, or
Sure.
Yeah. And
Happy
if there's
to
any
speak.
GPs, maybe we can also point them your way and so on, and also to some of our family office network that is
Yes.
listening, because there's a lot of them at the moment that are calling us, trying to set up in Singapore, and they're also tracking this. Thank you so much, Michele.
Thank you. Thank
Is
you
there
for
any
having me
question
here.
that I should have asked that I didn't? I always try and ask that. Is there anything you want me to cover?
No,
Or
I think
anything you want to
covered
say,
a
last
lot.
words, perhaps?
I can't think of much, but end of the day, spend your time on what is most important. And I think what is most important could be different to different people. But end of the day, if you do not have your name card and your CV, who's going to listen to you, who's going to be there for you, I think those are the people that you should spend more time with. It's a good start.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, then. Well, thank you very much to everybody for listening in. This is Ayaz Ahmed from the Fundraisers Podcast. Till next time.